Bradley Rickard, Professor of Applied Economics and Management at Cornell University. Bradley.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, for the invitation, and for queuing me up against lunch like that. This is an example of using big data to look at regulatory questions in the United States as it relates to alcoholic beverages. Okay? I'm an economist. This is an economic question, but I realize that this is also a political question, and this study really has stems. The genesis of this was the 21st Amendment to the Constitution in 1933, when they decided to end prohibition and then give individual states the authority on how to regulate alcohol markets, sales and distribution and production in states. And so what we see is this patchwork of regulations state by state. And the regulation that I'm going to speak about today is the availability of alcoholic beverages in food stores. Okay? And you can see, this is a difficult exercise, but I've tried to put the different states into these 4 different columns. Okay? But the truth of it is there's really 50 different columns, but I've tried to group them into these 4 where you generally don't find alcohol in grocery stores. On the left column, you find beer only in grocery stores in the second column. And as you can see, there's some stars. Massachusetts, for example, you will find beer and wine in some grocery stores, but each grocery store chain only has so many licenses that they have to choose which stores in their chain. And then you can see there's been some movement from the left to the right. So over time, over this time period, 2012 to today, some of these states have shifted their position. So Washington State, for instance, through an effort, I think mostly led by Costco, introduced spirits into grocery stores about a decade ago. And you can see some other examples. Kansas, Oklahoma have introduced full-strength beer and wine. And Colorado first introduced beer into grocery stores in 2019 and then introduced wine into grocery stores about 1 year ago. Okay? I'm from New York. New York is a perennial issue talking about introducing. We have beer in grocery stores. There's always discussions, political discussions about introducing. And there's clearly winners and losers when this happens. This is sort of a trilogy of papers I've written on this topic, looking at some of those, some of those consequences to liquor store owners, to wine producers, thinking about consumers and thinking about how it affects the diversity of wine products that they purchase in an environment where wine is available in food stores or not. This paper actually allowed me to, this was another paper that used big data and allowed me to track households using the Nielsen home scan data to watch households when they moved from one regulatory environment to another to see how it affected their purchases, the quantity, but also the diversity of products that they bought. But today, I think, I'd like to focus on these ballot initiatives that happened in Colorado recently. And again, in 2019, they allowed full-strength beer to be widely sold in food stores. And then in 2023, they introduced wine into grocery stores in Colorado. And I'm going to be, and this analysis that I'll be describing is based on data that's been made available from Nielsen through the University of Chicago to researchers. But there's a 2-year lag, and so I don't have data that will allow me to weigh in on this wine in grocery stores question in Colorado, but I do have data that allows me to look at the BIGS question, the beer in grocery stores. But I think there's something that we can learn by looking at how this has affected beer in grocery stores in Colorado. It'll give us a little bit of insight as to what we expect might happen now that wine has also very recently been introduced. And so I think I've said a lot of this. I think the purpose of this slide is to also motivate that this is a unique opportunity to look at a category addition into food retailing. When you look back in time, there's very few instances where you've seen a whole new category introduced into food retailing. And recently we've seen some categories We've seen guns leave, I think it was Dick's Sporting Store in Massachusetts, so that's a category exit. We've seen cigarettes being dropped from CVS, that's a category exit. But this is a nice example, a unique case where there's been a category introduction into these states and these alcoholic beverages. I also study food markets, and so this gives me an opportunity to look at the interaction between alcoholic beverage sales and food sales. And just to make it clear, I'm going to focus on the BIGS, the beer in grocery store story today, because I have this Nielsen data that's available with this 2-year lag. But as soon as I get that data, as soon as that 2-year lag is up, I'm going to dive into the WIGS, the wine and grocery store question in Colorado. So here's the question: if you're in the supermarket, if you're buying food and beer is now available or wine is now available, how does it affect your purchases of alcoholic products? But how does it also affect the food items that you buy when you're in the grocery store? And is there some complementary effects that we should be thinking about? This is a pretty powerful picture. This shows, if you're taking pictures of slides, I feel like this is a pretty important, my most important slide here. It just shows the pre and the post sales by channel of beer in the state of Colorado. So you can see pretty clearly sort of this pre and post 2019 period, how sales of beer in grocery stores and in liquor stores just flipped almost overnight. And to be honest, most of this blue bar in grocery stores pre-2019 was 3.2% beer. It was not full-strength beer. And you can see how quickly that changed. And we hear about this story anecdotally in the wine markets also in March of 2023. Okay, so I'm going to use, in this research, I'm using this large, there's 2 data sets made available from Nielsen. One is at the household level, so they track about 70,000 households every year. We know a lot about these households, and we know what they're purchasing food and beverage products across about 14 different channels. And they have a second data set as a retail, so this is what is sold through the retailers across the United States. And we're going to be employing, much like Olivier was describing in the previous presentation, we're going to employ one of these difference in difference approaches where we're looking at changes in space and changes in time. So we're comparing what happened in Colorado to what happened in Minnesota pre and post 2019. We chose Minnesota as our control state because there are no beer or wine or spirit sales in the state of Minnesota. Okay? And I might get a chance to show you some results from a specific subset of households. We call them beer purchasing households. We would do the same thing a year from now where we look at wine purchasing households to see if they respond differentially to this change in law. If I lose you between now and then, they do respond more strongly in a significant way. Just to keep this somewhat manageable, we focus on the top 10 food categories in grocery stores, which doesn't include beer in the state of Colorado, but if you go to a place like New York where beer is available in grocery stores, beer does kind of fall into those top 10 categories in food store sales. Those are the top 10 food categories in order in expenditures. If we were to pause for a moment, what food categories do you think would respond most significantly to the introduction of beer into grocery stores in Colorado? Yeah, I'm hearing some things. I had those same. They all respond in a positive way. There is this sort of rising tide lifts all boats. There is a positive response, but somewhat surprisingly to me, these were the 4 categories that stuck out with the strongest response to introducing beer in grocery stores in Colorado relative to Minnesota post-19, pre-19. And I have an explanation. I've done some additional work that can help to explain this. I didn't make this up. This is a picture I found. The guy's got produce. He's buying beer. So maybe it's a thing. Maybe I didn't need to do this research. Maybe this is This is well known. Overall, food retail sales in the state of Colorado went up by 1.5% net of beer in our econometric analysis. And the expenditures went up by 8% among these beer purchasing households in the state of Colorado. This is my explanation. It increased the sales for these more perishable categories, in part because we've also been able to show empirically that it has decreased the time between grocery store visits for some households. So there's a higher frequency of grocery store visits. And those visits tend to go to the more perishable aisles. This could be the result of new people visiting the supermarkets, maybe non-traditional supermarket shoppers. I have, there's more work, more analysis, but just in the interest of time, in your lunch, I want to just remind you this is not a Colorado thing, right? This is being discussed in a lot of states. If they have beer, they're talking about introducing wine. If they have beer and wine, they're talking about introducing spirits. And then just to remind you, the next time I see you, I'll have some results on this more recent regulatory change in Colorado, this plebiscite where voters weighed in and decided that they wanted wine in grocery stores about 1 year ago.